Like this video if you believe kindness can change the world. Subscribe for more stories that will shock and inspire you. And comment below. Have you ever had a gut feeling that saved you? There's a camera in your office. The chilling whisper of an 8-year-old girl. Those 7 words were enough to send shivers down the spine of millionaire tech mogul, Alex Vance. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the silent strength of the overlooked, and how a child's intuition shattered a world of calculated lies. Get ready, because what unfolds next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust. 8-year-old Lily Peterson, a quiet observer by nature, had mastered the art of watching long before she dared to speak. After bouncing between 3 different foster homes, observing was her shield, her survival mechanism. It taught her to distinguish between adults whose smiles reached their eyes and those whose eyes remained cold, regardless of their outward warmth. Now, standing hesitantly in the doorway of Alex's home office, she watched again. Alex Vance, 32 years old and a self-made millionaire from his groundbreaking AI security firm, sat rigidly at his gleaming obsidian desk. The blue light of his computer screen painted his focused face, while the late afternoon sun, piercing through the panoramic windows of his luxurious Beverly Hills home, cast long, distorted shadows across the room. The air hummed with the quiet thrum of cutting-edge technology, a digital heartbeat echoing the rapid pulse of his empire. He barely registered Lily's presence, his fingers dancing across the keyboard, his voice a low murmur into his headset, discussing complex neural networks and impenetrable firewalls. To the world, he was a genius. To Lily, he was still a benevolent stranger who had decided, almost on a whim, to adopt her. 6 months had passed since she moved into his sprawling mansion, and she still felt like a temporary guest, liable to be sent away at any moment. Alex provided for her every need. A spacious room, the most exclusive private school, and more toys than she could ever dream of. But his provisions felt akin to how he managed his business accounts. Efficient, distant, well-intentioned, but utterly devoid of personal warmth. Lily's small fingers nervously traced the elegant doorframe, trying to gather her courage. There were things she desperately needed to tell him, observations that twisted her stomach with a knot of growing fear. Yet, every time she tried to approach Alex with something important, he seemed to look right through her, as if she were merely another logistical problem to be solved with money and meticulous planning. The video call droned on, Alex discussing quantum encryption and data protection with a panel of faceless executives. Lily shifted her weight from foot to foot, 10 minutes ticking by as she waited, invisible. Then something within her snapped. She wouldn't be able to explain the surge of courage later. Perhaps it was the way the setting sun glinted off something small and dark, almost imperceptible, tucked behind the ornate, gilt-framed painting Chloe had given Alex last month. Perhaps it was the distant echo of her birth mother's voice, a faint memory telling her that truth always outweighed politeness. Or perhaps it was simply that 8-year-old hearts possess a clarity that 30-year-old minds have long since forgotten. Lily walked silently to Alex's chair and gently tugged on his custom-tailored suit jacket. He held up one finger without looking at her, the universal adult signal for wait. But Lily had waited long enough. She tugged again, more insistently. "Just a second, sweetie," Alex mumbled, his eyes still glued to the screen. This time, Lily didn't wait. She leaned close to his ear and whispered the 7 words that would unravel his meticulously constructed world. "There's a camera in your office, but it's not yours." The effect was instantaneous, electric. Alex's fingers froze mid-air above the keyboard. His entire body went rigid, as if he'd been struck by a bolt of lightning. The executive on the video call continued droning about quarterly projections, but Alex heard nothing except the terrifying echo of those 7 words from the small girl beside him. "Gentlemen, I need to call you back," he said abruptly, ending the meeting without explanation. The opulent office fell silent, save for the gentle hum of electronics and the thunderous beat of Alex's own heart. He turned to look at Lily, truly look at her, perhaps for the first time since she had arrived. Her big brown eyes, usually so quiet and observant, now blazed with an undeniable urgency. "What did you say?" he asked, though he'd heard her perfectly. "There's a camera in your office?" Lily repeated, her small hand pointing towards the expensive oil painting above his mahogany bookshelf. A romantic landscape of rolling hills and vibrant wildflowers that Chloe had insisted on buying for him last month. "Behind the gold frame. I've been watching it blink at night when you're not here." Alex followed her gaze, his mouth suddenly dry. Puzzle pieces began clicking into place with horrifying precision. Chloe's sudden, intense interest in his work schedule. Her uncanny habit of tidying his office while he was on calls. The way she always seemed to know exactly when he'd be working late, arriving with artisanal coffee and soft kisses at precisely the right moments. "How long have you been watching it?" he asked Lily, his voice barely a whisper. "Since she hung it up," Lily said simply. "I use my tablet to scan for signals when I can't sleep. There are lots of them in the house now, but that one's different. It's not connected to our network." Alex stared at this small girl who had just turned his carefully ordered world upside down with a single, astonishing sentence. In 6 months of living together, they'd barely exchanged a real conversation. He'd hired the best nannies, enrolled her in the most prestigious schools, bought her everything a child could possibly want. But he had never truly listened to her. He had never imagined that behind those quiet, watchful eyes was a mind sharp enough to detect surveillance equipment that he, a world-renowned cybersecurity expert, had missed entirely. The icy weight of her revelation began to settle in his chest. If there was a camera, if someone was watching, if Chloe was involved, the prototype security algorithm he'd been developing, worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars, sat on the very computer he used every day in this very room. "Lily," he said, and for the first time he truly saw her. Not as a responsibility, not as a good deed, but as a person. As someone who might just have saved him from a catastrophe he never saw coming. "We need to talk." Lily's revelation hung in the air between them like smoke from a fire that had just begun to burn. Alex pushed back from his desk, his mind racing through implications and possibilities, while the 8-year-old girl who had just potentially saved his empire waited patiently for him to process what she told him. "Show me," he said finally. "Show me everything you've seen." For the first time since she'd arrived at his house, Lily smiled. Not the polite, careful smile she wore around adults, but a real one. Someone was finally listening. She retrieved her tablet from where she'd left it on the hallway table, her small fingers moving with surprising confidence across the screen. Alex watched, fascinated despite his growing anxiety, as she navigated through apps he didn't recognize. "I learned this from watching you," she explained, pulling up a signal detection program. "When you were working on the router configuration last month, I downloaded it to see what was making my room feel buzzy at night." The tablet screen filled with a network map of their sprawling house. Alex recognized his own devices: computers, phones, smart home systems, security cameras. But there were others, unfamiliar signals that made his blood run cold. "There," Lily pointed to a cluster of red dots. "These appeared after Chloe started visiting more often. This big one is behind your painting. This smaller one is in the living room, inside that crystal vase she brought you. And this one," she scrolled to show the master bedroom, "is in your nightstand." Alex's world tilted. The woman he'd been falling in love with, the woman he'd been considering proposing to, had been systematically bugging his home. Every private conversation, every business call, every intimate moment. All of it recorded and transmitted to unknown receivers. "How long have you known?" he asked, surprised by how steady his voice remained. 3 weeks, Lily said quietly. "I kept trying to tell you, but..." She trailed off, but they both knew why she'd hesitated. He'd been too busy, too distracted by work and by Chloe's intoxicating presence to pay attention to anything an 8-year-old might have to say. "Tell me about Chloe," he said. "What have you seen her do?" Lily's expression grew serious, taking on that watchful quality he now realized meant she was remembering everything with perfect clarity. Children who'd been through the foster system learned to pay attention to details adults missed. Their survival had once depended on reading the signs correctly. She comes here when you're not home sometimes, Lily began. She has a key, but she always acts surprised when I see her, like she forgot I'd be here. She says she's cleaning or organizing, but she never actually cleans anything. Alex's hands clenched into fists. He'd given Chloe a key 3 months ago, a gesture that had felt romantic and significant at the time. She'd cried when he'd presented it to her, saying no one had ever trusted her like that before. She goes through your office, Lily continued. Not just looking around, but photographing things. She has this tiny camera smaller than a phone. I saw her take pictures of papers on your desk, and she always puts them back exactly where they were. What else? She asks me questions. Lily's voice grew even quieter. About your schedule, about when you work late, about your friends. She makes it seem like she's just being nice, trying to get to know me better. But foster kids learn to recognize when adults are fishing for information. The words hit Alex like physical blows. Every casual conversation, every seemingly innocent question Chloe had asked about his work, his business relationships, his daily routines. It had all been intelligence gathering. And she'd been using Lily, an 8-year-old child who'd already been abandoned and betrayed by the adults meant to protect her, as an unwitting source. There's something else, Lily said, her brown eyes meeting his directly. I think someone else is helping her. What do you mean? Marcus comes by sometimes when you're traveling. He and Chloe meet in your office. They whisper a lot and look at papers together. Last week, I heard him say something about making sure the timeline matches the product launch. Marcus Thorne, Alex's CFO, and one of his oldest friends. They'd built the company together from nothing, shared dreams and struggles and victories. If Marcus was involved, Alex's rational mind tried to reject what Lily was telling him. These were extraordinary accusations against people he trusted, people he loved. But the evidence was mounting, and he couldn't ignore the sophisticated surveillance equipment she detected throughout his home. Lily, he said carefully, why didn't you just ask me about the devices? Why did you investigate on your own? She looked down at her tablet, suddenly seeming very young. Because adults don't usually believe kids, especially kids like me. And because, she paused, struggling with something. Because I thought maybe you already knew. Maybe it was part of your security system. And I was being paranoid. The admission broke something inside Alex's chest. This brilliant, observant child had been carrying the weight of this discovery alone for weeks, uncertain whether to trust her own perceptions or the adults around her. She'd been protecting him while simultaneously protecting herself from the disappointment of not being believed. I believe you, he said firmly. And I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner. Lily's smile this time was radiant. So what do we do now? For the first time in their 6 months together, Alex looked at Lily as a partner rather than a responsibility. Her insights had already proven more valuable than those of his entire security team. Her careful observation and technological aptitude had uncovered a sophisticated espionage operation that could have destroyed everything he'd built. Now, he said, we figure out exactly what they're after and we stop them. Trust is earned in moments like these. Who has stood beside you when it really mattered? Like this video if you believe in unexpected heroes, and hit subscribe for more thrilling stories. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching the weight of secrets that now filled Alex's house. He'd spent the night staring at the ceiling, his mind churning through implications and possibilities, while Chloe slept peacefully beside him. Every breath she took felt like a lie, every unconscious touch like a betrayal. Lily found him in the kitchen at dawn, dark circles under his eyes as he mechanically stirred coffee he wouldn't drink. She was already dressed for school, her small backpack slung over her shoulder, but her expression suggested she hadn't slept any better than he had. We need help, she said without preamble, settling onto the bar stool across from him. I've been thinking about it all night. If Marcus is involved, we can't trust anyone from your company. And if Chloe suspects we know, she might destroy evidence or disappear. Alex marveled again at this child's clarity of thought. At 32, he'd built a multimillion-dollar empire through strategic thinking and calculated risks, but Lily, at 8 years old and with no formal training in business or espionage, had immediately grasped the essential problem they faced. "Who do you suggest?" he asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. "Eleanor," Lily said without hesitation. "She's been with your family since before you started the company. She sees everything that happens in this house, but people treat her like she's invisible. And," Lily paused, suddenly looking uncertain, "she's the only adult who's ever really listened to me here." Eleanor Vance had been the Monroe family's household manager for 15 years, ever since Alex's parents had first hired her to maintain their sprawling estate. When they died in a car accident 5 years ago, Alex had kept her on, partly out of loyalty, and partly because she ran his household with quiet efficiency that freed him to focus on his business. At 68, Eleanor had seen 3 generations of Monroes through their triumphs and disasters. More importantly, as Lily had noted, she was one of the few people who treated the 8-year-old like a person rather than a project. "Eleanor, it is," Alex decided. "Can you ask her to meet us in the library after school? Tell her it's important, but don't say why over the phone." Lily nodded solemnly, understanding the implications of operational security better than most adults. She slipped off the barstool and headed toward the door, then turned back. "Alex." Her voice was smaller now, vulnerable in a way that reminded him she was still just a child carrying an enormous burden. "What if we're wrong? What if Chloe really loves you and there's some other explanation?" The question revealed both her intelligence and her heart. Even after everything she'd observed, even with the evidence she'd gathered, Lily was still hoping she might be mistaken. She wanted the adults in her life to be trustworthy, wanted the family she'd found to be real and safe. "Then we'll figure that out too," Alex said gently. "But Lily, your instincts have been right about everything so far. Don't doubt yourself now." That afternoon, the 3 of them gathered in Alex's home library, surrounded by shelves of books that represented decades of accumulated knowledge and wisdom. Eleanor listened without interruption as Lily and Alex laid out their discoveries, her weathered hands folded calmly in her lap, her dark eyes sharp and alert behind wire-rimmed glasses. When they finished, she sat quietly for a long moment, processing everything they told her. "I've been wondering about Miss Chloe for weeks," she said finally, her precise, calm English a stark contrast to the swirling chaos in Alex's mind. Little things that didn't quite add up. She knew too much about your business schedules, seemed too interested in details about your friends and associates, and she has a way of watching people when she thinks they're not looking." "What kind of watching?" Alex asked. "The kind that measures and calculates," Eleanor replied. "I've seen it before in people who aren't what they pretend to be. She studies you, Mr. Alex studies this house, studies your routines. It's not the way someone in love observes their partner. It's the way someone gathers intelligence." Lily leaned forward eagerly. "You've noticed other things too, haven't you?" Eleanor smiled at the girl with genuine affection. "You see everything, don't you, little one?" "Yes, I've noticed other things. Phone calls she takes in her car after visiting, the way she's always here during important business calls, even when she claims to be busy elsewhere. And yesterday, I found her in your father's office at 6 in the morning, supposedly looking for a book." "At 6 a.m.? Alex's voice sharpened. "She said she couldn't sleep and wanted to borrow something to read, but she was standing by your computer, not near the bookshelves, and she looked startled when I appeared." Guilty. The 3 of them sat in heavy silence as the weight of accumulated evidence settled around them. Separately, each observation might have been explained away. Together, they painted a picture of systematic deception and surveillance. "So what's our next move?" Eleanor asked, and Alex realized she'd automatically positioned herself as part of their team. This elegant, dignified woman who'd spent decades managing households and keeping family secrets was ready to help them expose a conspiracy that threatened everything they held dear. "We need proof," Alex said. "Real evidence that will hold up if this goes to court or gets reported to the authorities. And we need to find out who she's working for and what they're really after." "I can help with that," Lily said quietly. "The surveillance devices she planted, they work both ways. If I can access their signals, I might be able to trace where they're transmitting to, maybe even intercept what they're sending." Both adults stared at her in amazement. This 8-year-old girl was proposing to conduct counter-surveillance operations that would challenge experienced intelligence professionals. "Where did you learn to do that?" Eleanor asked gently. Lily shrugged, suddenly looking embarrassed. "I read a lot, and I watch you work," she said to Alex. "Your cybersecurity programs aren't that different from the apps kids use to monitor network traffic for gaming. I just adapted them." Alex felt a surge of something that might have been pride, followed immediately by protective worry. Lily's capabilities were remarkable, but she was still a child who'd already been through too much. The last thing he wanted was to put her in danger. "Absolutely not," he said firmly. "This is getting too dangerous for you to be involved." Lily's expression shifted, her eyes flashing with the stubborn determination he was beginning to recognize as purely her own. "I'm already involved. I'm the one who discovered this. And I'm the only one who's been successfully watching them without being detected." "She's right," Eleanor said quietly. "And more than that, she's been keeping herself safe in this house for months while observing things the rest of us missed. Lily isn't just smart, Mr. Alex. She's careful. She's survived situations that would break most adults." Alex looked between these two females who'd somehow become his most trusted allies in the space of 24 hours. An 8-year-old girl with the observational skills of a trained spy and the moral clarity of someone who'd learned to distinguish truth from deception through necessity. And a 68-year-old woman who'd spent decades watching and protecting, who understood loyalty and recognized threats with the wisdom of experience. "All right," he said finally, "but we do this together. No one takes risks alone. We watch out for each other." Lily's smile lit up the room. "So we're like a real family now?" The question caught Alex off guard with its simple directness. Family. Not the arrangement of convenience and obligation he'd thought he was providing, but something real and chosen and mutual. "Yes," he said, and meant it completely. "We're like a real family now." Sometimes the most unlikely allies become the strongest teams. Who has stood beside you when it really mattered? Share your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you're rooting for Lily, and subscribe for more extraordinary stories. 3 days later, their carefully laid plans collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Alex stood in his office, holding the tiny surveillance device Eleanor had carefully extracted from behind Chloe's painting, while his world tilted on its axis. The evidence was undeniable now. A sophisticated piece of equipment worth thousands of dollars, broadcasting on encrypted frequencies to receivers they'd traced to a downtown location. But when he'd confronted Chloe with it an hour ago, expecting guilt or confession or at least surprise, she'd looked at him with such genuine confusion and hurt that he'd begun to doubt everything. "You think I'm spying on you?" she'd whispered, tears gathering in her emerald eyes. "Alex, how could you even imagine I'd do something like that?" Her reaction had been so perfect, so utterly believable that for a moment he'd wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake. Chloe was an actress by training, he reminded himself. A media expert who understood exactly how to manipulate emotions and perceptions. But the pain in her eyes had seemed so real. "Maybe there's another explanation," he'd found himself saying, hating the uncertainty in his own voice. "Maybe someone else planted these devices. Someone trying to frame you or destroy our relationship." Chloe had thrown herself into his arms then, sobbing against his chest, whispering about how scared she was that someone was targeting them, how grateful she was that he was willing to consider her innocence. And that's when Lily had walked into the room. The 8-year-old had taken one look at the scene. Chloe crying in Alex's arms, the surveillance device abandoned on his desk, and her face had gone completely blank. Not hurt or disappointed, but empty, shut down. It was an expression Alex recognized from their first few weeks together, when she'd still been braced for rejection and abandonment. "Lily, sweetheart," he'd started, but she'd turned and walked away without a word. Now, an hour later, he couldn't find her anywhere in the house. Eleanor was searching the grounds while he combed through every room, calling her name, growing more frantic with each empty space. He found her finally in the last place he thought to look. The small storage room behind the garage where they kept holiday decorations and forgotten furniture. She was curled up behind a stack of boxes, her tablet clutched against her chest. Her face streaked with tears she tried to wipe away. Lily. He sank down beside her, his heart breaking at the defeat in her small frame. Talk to me, sweetheart. You don't believe me, she said quietly, not looking at him. I showed you everything. I explained everything. But you still choose her. That's not true. I do believe you. The evidence is overwhelming. Then why is she still here? Lily's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through him like a blade. Why are you letting her cry on you and tell you she's innocent when we both know she's lying? Alex had no answer for that. Or rather, he had an answer he didn't want to admit. Despite everything they discovered, despite the surveillance equipment and the documented deception, part of him still wanted to believe Chloe was innocent. Part of him was still susceptible to her tears and her explanations and the intoxicating possibility that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. Adults are complicated, he said lamely. Sometimes we want things to be true even when we know they're not. Lily finally looked at him, and the disappointment in her brown eyes was devastating. I thought you were different. I thought you actually listened. I am listening. I did listen. No, she said with the terrible clarity of a child who'd been let down too many times. You listened to what I said, but you didn't believe it was more important than what you wanted, just like all the other adults. She was right, and they both knew it. Alex had spent his entire adult life making hard decisions based on evidence and logic, cutting ties with people who threatened his business or betrayed his trust. But when it came to Chloe, when it came to his own emotional needs and desires, he'd wavered. He'd allowed doubt to creep in, not because the evidence was weak, but because accepting it would mean losing something he desperately wanted to keep. You're right, he said quietly. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. Lily studied his face with those wise eyes. Are you sorry enough to do something about it? What do you mean? I mean, Chloe is still in our house right now, probably planting more devices or stealing more information while we're out here talking. I mean, Marcus is probably getting a report from her tonight about how successfully she handled your suspicions. I mean, they're going to keep doing this until they get whatever they came for, and then they'll disappear and leave us with nothing. Alex felt something shift inside his chest, a hardening of resolve that reminded him why he'd been successful in business for so long. Lily was right. While he'd been wrestling with his emotions and hoping for impossible explanations, the people who'd betrayed them were probably making their final moves. What do you need me to do? He asked. I need you to trust me, Lily said simply. Not just believe me, but actually trust me enough to let me help catch them. I've been working on something while you were figuring things out. She opened her tablet and showed him a screen full of data streams and network traffic that looked like something from his own cybersecurity programs. I've been monitoring their communications for the past 3 days. They're planning something big for tomorrow night. Something called Final Extraction that involves your prototype algorithm. How do you know all this? Because I hacked their surveillance system, Lily said matter-of-factly. The same way they've been watching us, I've been watching them. And Alex? Her voice grew harder, more determined than any 8-year-olds should ever need to be. They're not just stealing your algorithm. They're planning to destroy your reputation by making it look like you sold it voluntarily. Marcus has been preparing documents that make you look like a willing collaborator. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place with crystalline clarity. This wasn't just industrial espionage. It was character assassination designed to destroy him completely while enriching his enemies. And he'd almost let it happen because he'd been too emotionally compromised to trust the one person who'd been trying to save him. Alex looked at this remarkable child who'd been abandoned by multiple families, who'd learned to read deception and betrayal in adults' faces as a survival skill, who'd used her pain and experience to develop instincts that had already saved him once. I trust you, he said. And this time he meant it completely. What's the plan? Lily's smile was fierce and determined. We're going to give them exactly what they want, and when they take it, we're going to be ready. The hardest lessons come when we realize our hearts and our minds are telling us different things. Have you ever had to choose between what you wanted to believe and what you knew was true? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of true grit and unexpected heroes. The truth came in fragments over the next 18 hours, each piece more damning than the last. Eleanor found the first breakthrough while sorting through financial records she'd quietly been investigating. Marcus Thorne, Alex's trusted CFO and supposed best friend, had received 3 separate wire transfers totaling $200,000 over the past 6 months. The money had come from shell companies ultimately traced to Zenith Innovations, Alex's biggest competitor in the AI security market. "He's been selling you out from the beginning," Eleanor told Alex grimly as they huddled around her laptop in the library. "Every business strategy, every client meeting, every product development timeline, he's had access to all of it." But it was Lily who uncovered the deepest betrayal. Using techniques that impressed even Alex's professional paranoia, she'd managed to decrypt portions of the communications between Chloe and her handlers. What they revealed was a conspiracy more sophisticated and cold-blooded than any of them had imagined. "Look at this," Lily said, pulling up intercepted text messages on her tablet. "Chloe isn't just some corporate spy they hired. She's been working for Zenith for 3 years, specializing in what they call intimate infiltration of target executives." Alex's blood turned to ice as he read over her shoulder. The messages discussed Chloe's previous assignments: a defense contractor in Silicon Valley, a pharmaceutical executive in New York, a tech startup founder in Seattle. All men, all successful, all subsequently destroyed when their trade secrets were stolen and their companies collapsed under mysterious scandals. "She's done this before," he said numbly. "Multiple times. It gets worse." Lily continued scrolling through more intercepted data. "They've been planning your destruction for almost a year. Marcus gave them your psychological profile, your relationship history, even details about your parents' death. They designed Chloe's entire persona specifically to appeal to you. The casual cruelty of it stole Alex's breath. Every moment of their relationship had been calculated. Her interest in technology, her admiration for his work, her tears when he'd given her the house key. All of it scripted and performed by a woman who saw him as nothing more than a target to be exploited. But the most chilling discovery was yet to come. "Tomorrow night's extraction isn't just about stealing your prototype," Lily said, her young voice heavy with understanding far beyond her years. "They're going to frame you for corporate espionage. Marcus has been creating a paper trail that makes it look like you've been selling secrets to foreign competitors for months. When the FBI raids your office tomorrow, they'll find evidence that you're a traitor to your own country." "What evidence?" Alex asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Forged documents in your handwriting, bank accounts opened in your name with suspicious deposits, communications with overseas buyers that look real enough to fool investigators." Lily's eyes met his directly. "They're not just stealing from you, Alex. They're going to destroy your life so completely that even if you prove your innocence, eventually no one will ever trust you again." Alex sat in stunned silence as the full magnitude of the trap became clear. His business would be ruined. His reputation would be destroyed. He'd likely face federal charges that could put him in prison for decades. And worst of all, Lily would be left alone again, returned to the foster system because her adoptive father was a convicted criminal. "Why?" he asked finally. "Why go to such extremes? The algorithm is valuable, but not worth this level of risk and complexity." "Because it's not just about the algorithm," Eleanor said quietly. She'd been reading through more of the intercepted communications, her face grave. "Zenith Innovations is planning a hostile takeover of your entire company. With you disgraced and facing criminal charges, your stock price will collapse. They'll be able to buy controlling interest for pennies on the dollar." "It's brilliant in a horrible way," Lily added with the analytical clarity that never failed to amaze him. "They get your technology, your company, your market share, and your client base, all for the cost of bribing one employee and hiring one very skilled actress." Alex looked around the library at these two extraordinary people who'd become his family in the most unlikely way possible. Eleanor, whose loyalty and wisdom had sustained him through tragedy and triumph. Lily, whose courage and insight had saved him from destruction he'd never seen coming. They were depending on him to protect them, and he'd almost failed them completely. Not if we stop them first, he said, his voice carrying the hard edge of determination that had built his empire from nothing. Eleanor, can you get us copies of everything Marcus has been falsifying? I want to know exactly what evidence they're planning to plant. Already working on it, she replied with a smile that was pure steel. I've been his assistant for 5 years. I know where he keeps everything. And Lily? Alex turned to the 8-year-old, who'd somehow become his most valuable ally. How much can you intercept of their communications without them detecting you? All of it, she said confidently. They're using encrypted channels, but they're not expecting to be monitored by their own surveillance equipment. I can see every message, every plan, every backup strategy they've prepared. Then here's what we're gonna do, Alex said, feeling the familiar thrill of a chess game where he finally understood his opponent's strategy. We're going to let them execute their plan exactly as they've designed it. But when they reach for the prize, they're going to find we've set a trap of our own. What kind of trap? Lily asked, her eyes bright with anticipation. Alex's smile was sharp as a blade. The kind that turns predators into prey. Tomorrow night, when they think they're destroying me, we're going to destroy them instead. And we're going to make sure the whole world knows exactly what they tried to do. For the first time since this nightmare began, Alex felt like himself again. Not the love-struck fool who'd been manipulated by a beautiful woman. Not the betrayed friend who'd been sold out by his business partner. But the strategic thinker who'd built something from nothing and wasn't about to let anyone take it away. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Justice rarely comes easy, but it's always worth fighting for. When have you had to stand up against people who underestimated your strength? Tell us your story in the comments below. And if you're hooked, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of triumph against all odds. The next evening arrived with the weight of destiny hanging in the air like storm clouds before lightning strikes. Alex's house, which had been a home filled with warmth and growing trust just days ago, now felt like a stage set for the final act of an elaborate drama where everything, his future, his freedom, his family, hung in the balance. Chloe moved through the house with her usual grace, preparing for what she believed would be her final performance. She'd spent the day playing the concerned girlfriend perfectly, asking worried questions about his stress levels, suggesting they have a quiet dinner at home to help him relax before his big product launch tomorrow. She had no idea that every word she spoke was being recorded, every move she made was being monitored, and every electronic signal from her hidden communication devices was being intercepted and decoded by an 8-year-old girl who'd learned espionage out of necessity and refined it through pure determination. The extraction begins at 11 p.m., Lily whispered to Alex as they passed in the hallway. Marcus will create a distraction by triggering the fire alarm at your office building. While security is focused on that, Chloe will download the final algorithm files and transmit them to the overseas buyers. And the frame job? Already in motion. The FBI has received an anonymous tip about suspicious activity in your accounts. They're planning to raid your office at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, just after the technology transfer is complete. Alex marveled again at the sophistication of their enemies' planning. Every detail had been carefully orchestrated to ensure maximum damage with minimal risk to themselves. If Lily hadn't detected their surveillance, if she hadn't trusted her instincts and kept investigating despite being dismissed by adults, the trap would have been perfect. But they had detected it. And now the hunters were about to discover they'd been hunting something far more dangerous than they'd anticipated. At 10:30 p.m., Alex made his move. I'm going to check on some files at the office, he announced to Chloe, who was curled up on the couch with a book, the picture of domestic contentment. I know it's late, but I want to review everything one more time before tomorrow's presentation. Chloe's eyes flickered, just for an instant, with something that might have been excitement. Of course, darling. You know how important this is. I'll just stay here and finish my book. Actually, Alex said, as if the thought had just occurred to him, why don't you come with me? I could use the company, and you always make me feel more confident. For a split second, Chloe's mask slipped. Alex caught a glimpse of raw calculation behind her loving smile, the rapid mental adjustment as she weighed the implications of this unexpected invitation. "I'd love to," she said finally, "but I'm feeling a bit tired. Besides, you work better when you're not distracted by me." She accompanied this with the sultry smile that had captivated him for months. "You're probably right," Alex agreed, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I'll be back in a few hours." He left through the front door, making sure she heard his car start and drive away. But instead of going to his office, he circled back through the woods behind his property and slipped into the house through the basement entrance Eleanor had left unlocked for him. From the hidden observation post they'd set up in the unused maid's quarters, Alex, Lily, and Eleanor watched Chloe spring into action with the efficiency of a trained operative. The moment she was certain Alex was gone, her entire demeanor changed. The soft, loving girlfriend disappeared, replaced by a focused professional who moved with predatory purpose. She retrieved a sophisticated laptop from the hiding place she created in the guest bathroom, connected it to Alex's home network, and began what was clearly a well-rehearsed process of data infiltration. "She's good," Lily whispered admiringly. "Watch how she's bypassing the security protocols. She must have been studying your system for months." "Not good enough," Alex replied grimly. "She's downloading from the decoy server we set up this afternoon. Every file she's stealing is either worthless or contains tracking malware that will lead us straight to her buyers." Meanwhile, Eleanor monitored communications from Marcus, who was indeed at Alex's office building, preparing to trigger the fire alarm that would provide cover for Chloe's activities. His text messages to his Zenith handlers revealed a man convinced he was about to become wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. At 11:15 p.m., everything went according to the conspirators' plan. The fire alarm at Alex's office building created chaos. As security teams responded to what appeared to be a genuine emergency, Chloe completed her download and began transmitting the stolen files to encrypted servers overseas. Marcus prepared to plant the forged evidence that would frame Alex for treason. What they didn't know was that every step of their operation was being broadcast live to a secure government server where federal agents were recording everything for what would become the most comprehensive case of corporate espionage in recent history. At 11:45 p.m., Chloe received the text message she'd been waiting for. "Package delivered. Initiate Phase 2. Phase 2 was the destruction of evidence and her own disappearance. Within minutes, she would delete all traces of her activities, plant the final pieces of incriminating evidence against Alex, and vanish forever. By tomorrow morning, she'd be on a plane to a non-extradition country with enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life." Instead, she found herself looking into the faces of Alex, Lily, and Eleanor as they emerged from their hiding place. "Hello, Chloe," Alex said calmly. "Or should I call you by your real name? Rebecca Santos, age 31, wanted by the FBI for industrial espionage in 4 states. The transformation was instantaneous and chilling. The woman who'd spent months convincing him she loved him disappeared completely, replaced by someone whose eyes held nothing but cold calculation and barely contained rage. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into," she said, her voice carrying an entirely different accent now. "This is bigger than your little company, bigger than your naive understanding of how the world really works." "You're right," Alex agreed. "It is bigger than I understood. That's why the FBI has been recording everything for the past 6 hours. That's why your buyers overseas are actually federal agents conducting a sting operation. And that's why Marcus is currently being arrested at my office building." Chloe's face went white as the full scope of their counter-operation became clear. "Impossible. We monitored everything. We controlled every variable." "You controlled every variable except one?" Lily said, stepping forward with the quiet confidence of someone who'd outmaneuvered adults far more experienced than herself. "You never considered that an 8-year-old foster kid might be smarter than your entire operation." The look Chloe turned on Lily was pure venom. "You little—" "I wouldn't finish that sentence," Alex interrupted, his voice carrying a warning that made Chloe take an involuntary step backward. "You're talking to the person who saved my life and exposed your entire criminal network. Show some respect." Outside, the sound of sirens grew louder as federal agents surrounded the house. The trap that had taken months to set was finally springing. Not on Alex, but on the people who'd tried to destroy him. Justice, Alex reflected, sometimes came in the most unexpected packages. The most satisfying victories are the ones where the underestimated rise up to protect what matters most. Who has proven their strength when others doubted them? Tell us your inspiring stories. Like this video if you believe in the power of resilience, and subscribe for more incredible true tales. 6 weeks later, Alex stood in the courthouse lobby watching Marcus Thorne being led away in handcuffs. His former CFO and supposed best friend now facing federal charges that would likely keep him imprisoned for the next 20 years. The man who'd helped him build his company from nothing, who'd shared dreams and struggles and what Alex had believed was genuine friendship, had looked right through him as if he were a stranger. Betrayal, Alex had learned, left scars that went deeper than any physical wound. But healing, he was discovering, could come from the most unexpected sources. He looks smaller than I remembered, Lily observed quietly from beside him. At 8 years old, she'd become the star witness in a federal investigation that had unraveled a corporate espionage network spanning multiple industries in several countries. Her testimony had been so clear, so detailed, and so technologically sophisticated that prosecutors were calling it the most compelling evidence they'd ever presented. People usually do when you see them clearly, Eleanor replied, adjusting Lily's new dress. The formal adoption proceedings had concluded an hour ago, and Lily Vance was now officially, legally, and permanently part of their family. Alex looked down at the adoption certificate in his hands, the legal document that meant far less than the emotional truth they'd all discovered over the past 2 months. Family wasn't about paperwork or blood relations or good intentions. It was about choosing to stand together when the world tried to tear you apart. It was about trust earned through crisis and love proven through action. So what happens now? Lily asked, slipping her small hand into his. The gesture was natural now, comfortable in a way that spoke of security and belonging rather than politeness or duty. Now we go home, Alex said simply. To our home. The house felt different when they walked through the front door that evening. The surveillance equipment had been removed. The hidden cameras and listening devices that had turned their sanctuary into a stage for deception were gone. But more than that, the very air felt cleaner. Honest in a way it hadn't been since Chloe had first crossed the threshold with her calculated smiles and scripted affection. They'd redecorated together over the past few weeks, the three of them, choosing new furniture and colors and artwork that reflected who they actually were rather than who they thought they should be. Lily's drawings now hung in frames alongside expensive paintings. Eleanor's family photos had places of honor on the mantelpiece. The house had become a home in every sense that mattered. I have something for you, Alex told Lily as they settled in the living room with hot chocolate and the comfortable silence of people who no longer needed to perform for each other. He handed her a small wrapped box, watching as her eyes widened with the delight of a child who was still learning that good surprises were possible in her life. Inside was a device that looked like a sophisticated smartphone but was actually something far more special. A prototype security scanner Alex had been developing specifically for her, incorporating all the techniques she'd used to detect the surveillance equipment that had saved them both. It's yours, he said. Your own invention based on your innovations. I filed the patents in your name. Lily stared at the device, then at him, her brown eyes filling with tears. Mine? Really mine? Really yours? You're the youngest patent holder in the history of cybersecurity technology. And when you turn 18, the licensing fees will have generated enough money to pay for any college you want to attend. But it wasn't the financial implications that made Lily cry. It was the recognition, the acknowledgement that her contributions had been real and valuable and worthy of protection. For a child who'd spent years being dismissed and overlooked, having her innovations legally recognized and protected was validation of the deepest kind. There's something else, Eleanor said gently, producing an envelope from her purse. This came today. Inside was a letter from the FBI's Cybercrimes Division, formally thanking Lily for her assistance in breaking up what they were calling one of the most sophisticated industrial espionage rings in American history. They were recommending her for a civilian commendation, an honor that would become part of her permanent record and a testament to her courage and capability. They want to know if you'd be interested in consulting work when you're older, Alex explained. Apparently, your methods impressed some very important people in Washington. Lily looked at the letter, then at the two adults who'd become her chosen family, and smiled with pure happiness. Will you help me write back to them? Of course, Alex said. We'll do it together. Everything together from now on. As evening settled around them, they talked about practical things. School schedules and vacation plans and the security upgrades they wanted to install now that they understood how vulnerable their previous systems had been. But underneath the ordinary domestic conversations ran a deeper current of connection and commitment. They'd been tested by betrayal and conspiracy, by people who tried to use their trust against them and their love as a weapon for destruction. They'd survived not just intact but stronger, bound together by crisis in ways that good times alone could never have achieved. I love you both, Lily said as Eleanor tucked her into bed that night. The words spoken with the simple directness of someone who no longer feared that love was temporary or conditional. We love you too, darling. Forever and always, Eleanor replied, kissing her forehead. Alex stood in the doorway watching this bedtime ritual that had become precious to him, thinking about how completely his life had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been a successful but lonely man who'd adopted a child out of a sense of obligation and social responsibility. Tonight, he was part of a family that had chosen each other through trial by fire and emerged stronger than he'd ever imagined possible. Love, he'd learned, wasn't something that happened to you. It was something you did every day, through the small acts of attention and care that said, "You're important to me, you matter, your voice is heard." And trust, real trust, wasn't given blindly. It was earned through consistency, proven through crisis, and honored through the choice to keep choosing each other even when it was difficult. As he turned off the lights and headed to his own room, Alex reflected on the lesson he'd never expected to learn from an 8-year-old girl. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important truths, and the people you least expect to save you turn out to be exactly the family you never knew you needed. Real family is built through choosing each other again and again, especially when it's hardest. Who has chosen you, and who have you chosen in return? Share your stories below. Like this video if you believe in the power of chosen family, and subscribe for more inspiring narratives. 1 year later, Alex Vance stood at the window of his home office, the same room where a small girl had once whispered words that changed everything. Watching Lily install security software on Eleanor's laptop with the patient expertise of someone who'd found her calling early in life, the sun streamed through windows that now held no secrets, illuminating a space that had been transformed from a target for espionage into a sanctuary for innovation. The walls displayed framed articles about their story, including a feature in Forbes about the 8-year-old who revolutionized corporate security, and a piece in People magazine titled, "The Family That Fought Back." But the most treasured item in the room was a simple handwritten note from Lily, framed on his desk. "Thank you for finally listening. Love, your daughter." Your daughter. Not adopted daughter, not foster daughter, just daughter. The distinction mattered in ways that legal documents could never capture. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Eleanor asked from the doorway, her voice carrying the gentle concern of someone who'd watched him rebuild his life from the ground up over the past year. Alex nodded, looking at the calendar on his desk. Today marked exactly 1 year since Chloe's arrest. 1 year since the federal raids that had exposed the Zenith Innovations conspiracy. 1 year since their family had been forged in the fire of betrayal and emerged stronger than ever. It was also the day he'd chosen to make an announcement that would change everything again. "Ladies," he said, gathering his courage in the way he'd learned to do over the past year. Not by shutting down his emotions, but by acknowledging them and moving forward anyway. "I have something important to tell you both." Lily looked up from the laptop, her brown eyes bright with curiosity. At 9 years old, she'd grown taller, more confident, but she still possessed the watchful intelligence that had saved them all. The difference now was that her vigilance came from strength rather than fear, from the security of knowing she was wanted and valued, rather than the terror of potential abandonment. "I've decided to step back from day-to-day operations at Vance AI Security," Alex continued. "I'm promoting Sarah Jenkins to CEO, and I'm going to focus on research and development. Specifically, I want to work on technology that helps protect families like ours. Eleanor smiled knowingly. You're going to build better security systems for homes, among other things. But more importantly, I want to be present for this family, in ways I wasn't before. I want to be the kind of father who hears what his daughter is trying to tell him the first time she says it, not the 20th. Lily's face lit up with pure joy. Does this mean you'll have time to help me with the new scanner prototype? It means I'll have time for whatever matters to you, Alex replied. School projects, science fairs, teaching you to drive when you're old enough, scaring away boys when you start dating in about 20 years. 20 years. Lily laughed. That seems excessive. 30 years then. I'm flexible. Eleanor shook her head with fond exasperation. Men always thinking they can control timing when it comes to matters of the heart. But her eyes held deep approval as she watched the easy banter between father and daughter. This was what she'd hoped for when she'd first encouraged Alex to really listen to Lily. Not just the resolution of a crisis, but the building of a genuine relationship that would sustain them through all the ordinary challenges and joys that lay ahead. There's something else, Alex said, his tone growing more serious. I've been thinking about what we learned this year, about how easy it is for people to be fooled by those who prey on trust and loneliness. I want to do something about that. He pulled out a business plan he'd been working on for months, pages of detailed proposals and financial projections for something entirely new. I want to start a foundation, he explained, an organization that helps people who've been targeted by confidence schemes, romance scams, corporate espionage. I want to provide resources for victims, training for law enforcement, and education programs that teach people to recognize the warning signs. What would you call it? Lily asked, already scanning through the proposal with the rapid comprehension that never failed to amaze him. The Lily Foundation, Alex said simply, named after the person who taught me that wisdom doesn't come from age or experience alone. It comes from paying attention to the truth, even when that truth is inconvenient or painful. Lily stared at him, speechless for one of the few times in their relationship. The idea that her name would be associated with helping others, that her experience and insights would be used to protect people from the kind of deception they'd faced, clearly overwhelmed her in the best possible way. I think, Eleanor said quietly, that sounds like exactly the right way to honor what you've all learned. Over the following months, as the foundation took shape and began its work, Alex discovered that the lessons Lily had taught him extended far beyond cybersecurity and corporate espionage. She'd shown him that listening, really listening, to the people you love was the foundation of every meaningful relationship. That trust wasn't something you gave automatically, but something you built through consistent actions over time. That family wasn't about who shared your DNA, but about who chose to stand beside you when life tried to knock you down. Most importantly, she taught him that some of the most important truths come from the smallest voices. The children, the overlooked, the underestimated who see clearly because they haven't yet learned to doubt their own perceptions in favor of what others expect them to believe. On the first anniversary of the Lily Foundation, they received a letter from a woman in Ohio whose elderly mother had been saved from a romance scam by information she'd learned from their educational programs. The would-be victim had recognized the warning signs and contacted authorities instead of sending money to someone who claimed to love her but had never met her in person. One more family safe, Lily said softly as she read the letter aloud during dinner that night. One more person who listened to that little voice inside that says, something's not right. Speaking of little voices, Alex said, what is yours telling you about your future? You're getting older, developing your own dreams and goals. What do you want to do with all that brilliance of yours? Lily considered the question with characteristic seriousness. I want to keep learning about technology, about people, about how to protect the things that matter. And I want to help other kids who don't have families yet find theirs, the way I found mine. That sounds like a perfect plan, Eleanor said warmly. And you'll always have us to support you, whatever you decide. As they cleared the dinner dishes together, a family ritual that had become precious to all of them, Alex reflected on how completely his understanding of success had changed. A year ago, he'd measured his worth by profit margins and market share, by the size of his bank account and the recognition of his peers. Now he measured it by Lily's laughter, by Eleanor's contentment, by the knowledge that they'd built something real and lasting together. He measured it by the families they'd helped through the foundation, by the young people who'd learned to trust their instincts because of Lily's example, by the simple but profound satisfaction of living a life aligned with his deepest values. That night, as he tucked Lily into bed, a ritual she still treasured despite her growing independence, she looked up at him with those wise brown eyes that had seen too much too early, but had never lost their capacity for hope. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what, sweetheart? For listening, for believing me, for becoming the kind of father who hears what his daughter is trying to tell him." Alex kissed her forehead, his heart full of gratitude for the child who taught him that the most important conversations often begin with whispers, and that the smallest voices sometimes carry the greatest wisdom. "Thank you," he whispered back, "for teaching me how to listen." Outside, the world continued its complex dance of joy and sorrow, triumph and betrayal, connection and loss. But inside their home, three people who'd chosen each other slept peacefully, protected not just by sophisticated security systems, but by the deeper security of being known, valued, and loved exactly as they were. And in the morning, they would wake up together, ready to face whatever challenges came their way, secure in the knowledge that some families are built through crisis and strengthened through choice, and that the most powerful force in the world is a small voice speaking truth to those wise enough to listen. Your voice matters, no matter how small it might seem. Your instincts are valuable. Your observations are important. Your truth is worth sharing. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember that they're seen, heard, and valued. Like this video if you believe in the power of chosen family, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the strength found in unexpected places. Sometimes the person who saves us is the one we least expect, and sometimes that person is ourselves.